Well, welcome to the New Day podcast, and thank you so much for watching. Why don't you go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, and like us on all of our social media channels where we put out more content about life and God and faith that we think will be helpful for your life. And as we kind of wrap up the year, I wonder if you've been reflecting a little bit on your year, and we've been doing that a little bit. And so we wanted to shoot a quick podcast today on three lessons we've learned from 2023. See what we did there? 3 lessons in 2023. And so we hope that it's helpful for your life and soul. So John, why don't you kick us off, man? What's one big lesson that you've learned this year?
Well, I learned that dry cleaning costs a lot in 2023. No, for real, I literally just went to the dry cleaners and I dropped off 7 shirts, and it was $23 to have 7 shirts dry cleaned. So, but no, the first real thing that I learned was in 2023, and these are lessons from our personal lives, is consistency is king. That's been a really big one for me. One of the things that we love to do personally and also at New Day is we like to demystify spiritual growth and spiritual health. You can hear on a stage a pastor say, you should be spiritually healthy, or you should, walk closely with the Lord. But we're very aware that a lot of people that listen to that, they're like, hey, what does that mean on Monday morning? What does that mean for my life? And even for us as pastors, like that sometimes it feels ambiguous. I want to be healthy spiritually, but what does that mean? And a really big thing for me in 2023 that actually came out of our church-wide vision was one of the things that we did was we said, hey, listen, our whole vision for the year was spiritual health. Like that was we're not adding a new campus, it's like spiritual health. And so we said, and to do that, we're gonna have 3 simple practices that we agreed to together. And so one is starting your day with God. So we did a daily Bible reading plan. 2 was never miss church, commit to be in church on Sundays. And then number 3, practice confession. Basically, deal with the things in your life, admit them. We do communion Sundays at the last Sunday of the month, and so practicing that regularly. But the big idea was all these good things, do them consistently, right? Not just every now and then. Craig Groeschel, who's a well-known pastor, has a really great quote, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's great leaders do consistently what most people do occasionally, and that's the big thing. And so so that was our vision for the year. And so, but the thing for me that really, transformed me and was just so eye-opening was our starting our day with God. And so we have a daily Bible reading plan Monday through Friday. We read through the New Testament together as a church. And so the big idea was okay, when you wake up, when you start your day, begin your day by opening up the Word of God and reading whatever chapter we're reading for that day. And what was really cool about it was the more I did it consistently, I realized that one of the things that had been getting in the way of my own relationship with God and my own sense of my own spiritual well-being were my feelings. And because, sometimes in church world or when you walk with the Lord, whenever you pray or read the Bible, you want to have these feelings. I want to feel so close to God and this present. I want the warm fuzzies. I don't just want to read the Bible. I don't just want to pray. I want to feel close to God. But that feeling can become addictive and can almost become a condemning thing where it's if I don't feel super close to God, or if I pray and I don't quote unquote feel anything, then what does it matter? And so for me, a lot of times, especially in this busy season with a lot going on in my family and with the kids, is, it's hard to find as much of those feelings because you're just doing a lot, And so for me, it would discourage me in my own walk with the Lord or my own quiet times in the morning. And what was amazing this year was I kind of made a focus of it doesn't matter how I feel. I'm just going to do the right thing. I'm just going to show up. And so every morning I would wake up and I would open the Bible and I would read the chapter for that day. I would close my eyes and try to meditate for 5 minutes on it. And then I would just pray. And I wouldn't evaluate how I was praying. I would just do it, And so, and literally for me, it became a check the box thing. I did this today. And what I began to find was as I did that consistently, it just felt so life-giving spiritually. And some days I felt a lot of warm spiritual feelings. Some days I didn't feel any. But even on those days, I had the confidence that I'd shown up and done it. And what I'm learning in the world that I'm living in, which is the same world that we're all living in, is there's so much going on and there's so many things to do. We have more options than anyone else in the history of humanity. And so it makes consistency that much harder. And so then we're not consistent, and then we don't get the benefits of consistency. And so one of the things I learned, one of the most important things was just like, I was more consistent in reading the Bible and praying this year than I have been, probably ever in my life, and even as a pastor, I struggle with that. And I tell people, like, listen, I struggle. I wake up with 3 kids and a to-do list and a lot going on. I'm tempted not to pray. I'm tempted not to read the Bible. And so that consistency was great. And the last thing I'll say about this, and I want to hear what your first one is, and I have no data or science to back this up, but I'm going to make a claim. But I really believe this. I think it really, really, really helped my mental health. I don't know if this is a thing. I think consistency and your mental health are tied. And so like another example is like, I did this also with my working out, where like before I wouldn't work out because I felt tired. I was like, I can't do this whole workout routine. But I would literally go to the gym and just do like 20 minutes of cardio and leave. I would just do something better rather than nothing. And I just think this year, even with my circumstances being as challenging as they've been, I've had really good like mental health, especially the last 6 months. And I just think a big part of that is tied to my consistency. I think you need a consistent rhythm, doing the right things. And I think especially in this moment, I think it really helps you get like really good mental health. And so consistency is king. But what about you, man? What's the first thing you've learned in 2023?
That's really good. I think for me, this was a big year of leadership for me, leading our staff team and just kind of leading in the home and kind of hitting that age where, you're leading a lot of things, have a lot of responsibility. And so for me this year, it's been just the importance of pursuing and being committed to excellence as a leader. And I think this applies to like your role or vocation or church or whatever that is, but then also in your home life as well. And, we pursue excellence because like the important things matter. Like if you're going to do something, it matters that you do it, and it matters that you do it well. Excellence like glorifies God. And so, God calls us, he puts callings on our lives, whether that's your vocation, your work, or like you at home, like you have a calling on your life. And so we're called to steward that really well. And here's where I think people, and where I got kind of excellence kind of twisted when I was younger, or even last year, I equated excellence with perfection, and they're different. And I had a mentor of mine like share this with me, the best definition of excellence that I've ever heard, and that's doing the best you can with what you got. Yeah. Right. So not doing the best you can with what someone else has, like their resources. Not
a miracle worker.
No, exactly. but doing the best you can and being committed to that in your life. And so like in my own leadership, especially in the church, I tried to pursue that in the ministries that I oversee and the ministries that I lead, because they matter, right? Like when I do things, when I lead things, I want it to be a blessing to the people around me. And when I'm sloppy, when I'm missing things, when lights in the church service are messed up, or there's miscues, or there's mic issues, like those kind of things are distracting and not a blessing.
That does not glorify God.
No, it doesn't glorify God.
No way.
No, and it doesn't bless people, right? And think even in our personal lives, like when you don't have a budget, we don't stay on top of that stuff. Like nothing in your life drifts towards excellence, right? Nothing in your life.
What does it drift towards?
Dysfunction. It's like dysfunction toward, like disintegrate, all those things. And so pursuing excellence. But the caveat that I would add to that is like in the midst of that, I've been trying to stay like a positive leader, like reminding people we can do this. Like we can do the best we can with what we got, and not, Carey Nieuwhof, who's like a Christian leader, he said, you can have a critical eye without having a critical spirit. And that's really what I've tried to develop this year. And so, for instance, we had something happen on our team this past year where this guy on our team, honestly, he made a mistake. And man, it's funny. He called me up and he was like, I'm really sorry that I did this, and I was really nervous to call you about this. But I felt like in the midst of that, there was an opportunity to kind of coach, but also to care. And by the end of the call, he was just so thankful that like we were able to kind of work it out, right? And so I think he understood that, we're pursuing excellence. We're trying to do things well. We're trying not to make mistakes. But in the midst of that, like there's grace, and you don't have to be like a critical person to have that critical eye. And so for me, it's just a lot of leadership and excellence this year, and just wanting to just do the best that I can do with what God has given me.
That's good, man.
What about you, man? What's number 2?
Number 2 for me, and I wrote this one down on my phone because there were just a lot of thoughts I was like sorting through. And it's going to take some explaining for this to make sense to people, but I think they'll get what I mean when I say it. It's that number 2 was for me, sometimes God's will for you is to adapt, not to overcome. And I learned this in 2023. In May of 2023. May 2023 was the worst month of my entire life. And for me, May 2023 was a culmination of really two things. One, my wife having, grade 4, what's considered terminal brain cancer. So one of the worst things you can have, mixed with me wrongly responding in our life to that. And so I kept having this mindset of like, I have to overcome this, I have to okay, we have this incredibly hard situation that has so many negative emotions, and it's disorienting, and it's sad, and it's got all these physical limitations to your family and your ability. And my wife can't drive the kids anywhere because for different reasons. And, she's tired a lot, and there's a lot going on. And I just had this sense of even though all these things are happening, I'm still trying to be the same family we've always been. I'm trying to be the same pastor I've always been, and do just as much as I've always done, and still, improve and get better and all these kinds of things. And it was just really, really unwise, and it burned me out to the point where it all came to a head in May of this year, where I've had an ongoing arm and shoulder issue that is just not getting better. I've dealt with it for 18 months at that point. And I finally went to the doctor, and they gave me this tentative diagnosis called TOS, thoracic outlet syndrome. And honestly, we're not sure at the moment if that's what it is, because another doctor has now told me he does not think I have that. But when they told me that, I didn't really realize what it was. And then I did what you shouldn't do, which is you go on Google and look it up, which don't look up your diagnosis on Google, just consult with your doctor and let that be the final word. And of course you hear I realized how, if that is what it is, it's a pretty serious condition. There's a lot of chronic pain that you deal with. It just broke me. I was this is too much. How all of my wife's situation with her cancer, plus this, when I'm trying to carry all this stuff, it sent me into a pit of depression. And I don't struggle with depression a ton. I get random, out of nowhere, or not out of nowhere, but I just get bouts of it, And it just sent me into a pit in the month of May. And I started having all these physical symptoms of all these pains in my body. I was having twitches all across my body. I thought I was dying. I thought something is just wrong with me. And I just went into a really big pit. But I realized what it was it wasn't just that, because the whole, the months leading up to that in 2023, I could feel myself getting tired. I remember telling Halsey multiple times, hey, I've just got too much going on. I feel kind of overwhelmed. And I remember even journaling about that. And my advice to anybody listening to this is when you're saying that a lot, you need to listen to that, because a lot of times those are warning signs that something's about to break. And, we can, throw it up to just being, well, that's a normal life. But I was feeling it, so it wasn't even just this moment. It wasn't even just her diagnosis and then my diagnosis. It was something was going on that I was ignoring. And so I get into this pit. And so many things happened, man. It was insane. That year I was also preaching almost every single week, which I normally not preach that much, but I was trying to get better at my craft and do it more often. I'm with 3 campus church, a lot going on. We're starting a school at the church. And so our church and organization are growing a lot. I'm doing more at home because my wife, she can't order the groceries anymore. She can't, make the kids lunches. And so I'm doing all these things. And so when I look back on it, I was just doing an insane amount of things and trying to once again overcome, we're going to keep doing everything we've always done. I was coaching my daughter's soccer team. I was also leading a cohort of other pastors trying to replant we've done here. It's silly when I think back on it, but here's the big idea. I was trying to overcome when God was really calling me to adapt to it. And a really good example of this is in 2 Corinthians. People are really familiar with the story of Paul's thorn in his flesh, where he had this problem, and we don't know what the problem was exactly, but he had this problem that he referred to as a thorn in his flesh. And he says he prayed 3 times that God would remove it. And then it's clear that God does not remove it. And so pretty much what Paul says is, God's revealed to me that I'm going to use you through this, that actually it's going to make you stronger and better. And that reminded me that sometimes in life when we pray for something, sometimes God will grant the prayer request. He will do the thing we ask. And sometimes he doesn't. And if he doesn't, it's okay to continue praying for healing or whatever you're longing for, but you need to adapt, because God is calling you to walk with this thing. And I just think that's important to remember, because overcoming sounds so appealing. And it's like, well, of course God wants me to overcome. Of course God wants me to like do great things in light of XYZ, but you have to adapt. And looking back on it, when my wife was diagnosed, it took 6 months of craziness and treatment. I mean, I wasn't thinking clearly, but after that first 6 months, I should have sat down and say, okay, listen, like our life has radically changed. We have this whole new variable we've never had before. It's going to be a lot. So we need to cut back in some areas of life to make margin for this, because before all this, we didn't feel like we had a bunch of margin. So if you feel like you're redlining already and then this happens. And so it just reminded me that like in life, it's good to pray for things, but if God doesn't change it, like you need to adapt to it because God's calling you not to walk through it, but to walk with it. And that was a big thing I learned. And so, like in your life, whoever's listening to this, you've got some things where God does incredible breakthroughs and things change. We've also got areas where it's like, this is just kind of a lingering thing. Like you need to really adapt and change your life to where you can walk with that thing in a healthy way. And so the final thing I'll say on this point, in terms of like adapting and not always trying to overcome is, and I really mean this, like the bad thing about May 2023 was I got into the worst pit of my entire life. The good thing was but even by the end of May 2023, I realized I'm in a pit. It's going to take a while to get out of this, but I'm like, I'm going to make some changes now that I have confidence in the next, 3 or 4 months are going to get me out of this. It worked, dude. I mean, I feel incredible right now. And I pulled back on some preaching. I went back to kind of preaching as much as I normally had before. I tried to do more. I stopped coaching my daughter's soccer team. I pulled back on this cohort that I was leading. I started thinking about my health more. And so I got like a standing desk, to take care of my body and just things like that. And I, once again, got more consistent in starting my day with God. And I knew overnight it wasn't going to change me, but I had confidence that like over time it would work, and it did. And so like, even if you're in that moment, like start making those changes in faith that, okay, I'm going to live in accordance with what you're calling me to live with. And he will bless that, and so he'll either, he either takes you through it or he gives you the strength to walk with it. And so that's been a big thing for me.
Yeah. It's interesting when you say like overcome versus like all you need to do is adapt, not overcome. Overcome sounds like really daunting, It's like, I need to overcome this, but adapting feels like, yeah, I'm recognizing the season I'm in. I'm like, respond to that. That's really good, man. And actually it's funny you say that because mine is like a little bit similar in terms of like kind of where we're putting time and energy and focus, because I haven't fully fleshed this one out. This is a fairly recent thing that I learned, but like it's a phrase that maybe you'll find like really helpful. And the phrase is sideways energy. And it's a term that's kind of materialized on our team. And, when we have meetings or when we think about what ministries we're going to do or where we're going to spend our time, like this phrase sideways energy has been coming up, and I'll kind of explain what that means. So sideways energy are the things in our calendar. It's our commitments. It's where we spend our time and energy and focus that are not like bringing us closer to our calling or to happiness or a family, whatever the things that are important to us are, right? So these are the things that maybe like other people are telling you are important. My wife and I were in a season with our kids where they're not quite in like kind of like sports world, but we're starting to get some invitations to that world, to like the little league world or the peewee world, and we had this conversation together where it's like, hey, are we going to put our kids in this? Is this going to make us happier as a family? Is it going to help them become better followers of Jesus when they grow up? And maybe every person needs to answer that question. But for us, we kind of came to the conclusion that like, no, that would probably be sideways energy for our kids at this point in time, right? And so as I'm looking at my life and schedule, similar to you, where it's kind of like looking at what we do and being like, okay, is this like in my calling? Is it what God has called me to do? Or is it something that I think I need to do? Is it a waste of time? Is it like a distraction? Or is it something that's kind of moving me closer to what I'm supposed to do? So I haven't really fleshed this one out yet, but I just want to put it out there because it might be helpful to you, or even to you, like this idea of like, are we putting our time and energy toward things that are actually moving us forward versus like moving us sideways? It's not moving us closer to where we want to go.
That's good, man. Yeah, it's like when your schedule doesn't align with your values, and I go back to like what I was saying earlier, where it's like we have more options today. And it's funny too, man. So we did this. I didn't mention this. Actually, one of my things that helped me was we didn't do youth sports for the fall. We had done it. and we didn't do it for any of our kids. Like I said, I just want to tell you, if you're a parent out there, especially, that's an option. You know, I know it seems like it's not, but our kids are still, you know, healthy and happy and doing a bunch of great stuff. So the last thing for me, the third thing, and like you, man, it's like, you know, I'm still processing, you know, this one specifically in a few different ways, but the third thing that I learned, and I'm not just saying this, like when I look back on like my year, like what was I working on a lot? What was I thinking about? What was God kind of doing in my life? The third thing I learned, the best way I can put it, is that if you honor God with your money, he will take really good care of you. If you honor God with your money, he will take really good care of you. And the reason why I say that is because for some reason in 2023, a big part of my focus was getting our finances organized. Neither my wife or I are the most organized people. You know, a lot of times in couples, you've got like two people that are like super organized and they're like super on top of everything. And a lot of couples, maybe one of the two is like the organized person who kind of does all that. In our family, neither one of us are detail people or organized people. And so I'm a little bit more so that way. So I get to do that, but it's not really my gifting. And so I was actually way behind on, like, we had a lot, like some money sitting in savings that we'd saved up over the years that was just like literally in a Wells Fargo account getting zero interest when it could have been invested in the stock market the last 10 years. I tried to think about how much money we lost by not investing our money well. Same thing. We had like, this is really embarrassing to admit, honestly, but like we had like 4 random different retirement accounts in different places from different jobs that we had and like had no idea how much money was in them or what was going on. And so anyway, so I realized like this year, I was like, okay, I need to get this figured out. I just turned 35. So I'm like, I got to figure out my life, you know, I need to get this organized. Like retirement will come one day, you know? But anyway, so, I started getting on top of that. And so I got all of our accounts, retirement accounts, like, you know, in the same place and got them invested. I began to organize my finances, and we had saved up over the years some money because we had thought about doing some different kinds of investments. And I realized through organizing our money, a few really surprising things. And this is amazing considering I don't think we were super on top of organizing our finances. I realized, I'm kind of looking at our financial portfolio and where we were at, that we had given close in our lifetime. We've been tithing now for over 10 years. When we first got out of college and got jobs, started tithing. We have given away specifically to the church, maybe almost $100,000 in our lifetime already, you know, and we've never made a lot of money. Like neither of us have ever made 6 figures ever, you know. We've never made a ton of money. And her work has been kind of like, sometimes she's worked, sometimes she hasn't, you know. And, you know, when I started here, especially way back in the day as a pastor of a struggling church, a very, very low, modest salary. And I realized, but we were always tithing, always giving 10%, and 10% adds up, even if it's not all that much, over like a decade or so. And so like, I'm not sure how many people can say that, you know, and once again, it's not like we've given all this money. It's like, that's just what happens when you tithe, you know? And so like, I can't tell you how good that feels to know that like, we don't just like say we love the church, but we support it in that way. But then on top of that, so we've been able to give that amount of money away, even though we've never made a lot of money. And then also like when I finally did align all of our like investment portfolio up with different things we have investments in, like honestly, like the portfolio was like super healthy. Like we're in a really good place financially. So we weren't organized, but we're in a really good place financially. And then also we've had all the things that we need. You know, we have all of our needs met. We have the house in the community. We live in the city, have a house in the city that our family needs. And we've also never been the people, we always joke about this, James, like I've never gotten the miracle check from somebody. Yeah. Like some people, they get miracle checks all the time where it's like, I had no money and I prayed and someone just said, I felt God told me to give you a check for 20. No one's ever given me a miracle check, you know? And I'm happy for those that have gotten it. I mean, I'd like to get one too eventually, but you know, so it's just like, all it is like whatever the income was for all of the years. And then we have our budget or whatever. But the big thing is like, I don't feel like we've ever made that much money really, but I feel like we've been able to be generous and we're very healthy financially. And I don't know how that happened. I really don't. And I was actually really encouraged when we organized our finances, that like, if you had told me you're going to give away 10% of your income every single year in your 20s and into your 30s, I would say, okay, I'm willing to do that, but I'm probably going to be pretty broke in the rest of my life. And I just feel like God has just been so faithful. And so I really just believe like the most important thing we can do with our money is we can give to the Lord first. Like say, God, I see like, God, you give me 100%, so I can at least give you back 10, you know? And I'm just a huge proponent of that. I don't judge somebody if they don't do it. But I also, as a pastor, I also talk to a lot of people, and this is an area of life that a lot of people, even people I think that make good money, they're really dysfunctional financially. But nobody likes to talk about it because nobody wants to be public about it. So people just suffer in silence. And so like, getting organized with your finances, getting out of debt, maybe not buying the really nice car or not buying the house that you can't afford. But a lot of people struggle with finances, and I don't know, it doesn't make sense. Like, well, you're struggling, we'll give money to the church or to tithe or whatever. But I'm just telling you, it's my testimony. God has done a miracle in our life financially with the place that we're in. And I just think that's important to note that. Last thing I'll say on that too is like, man, one of the best things I ever did was I got like a budgeting app. I use Every Dollar, which this sounds like a paid ad now, but it's not. It's totally what this sounds like. And it just really helped me because I'm not the most organized person. Like they kind of organize it for you. And so my encouragement is like, even if you're here, you're not organized, you're great with money. I'm not either. I paid $10 a month for this app, and it just, and it sounds like
Can we get sponsored by Ramsey?
Yeah, thank you, Dave Ramsey. But it just helps because you know where your money's going, And so I've just been super blessed by that, and that's been, hopefully something that I can continue. Now that I've learned it a little bit, I want to help people with that as well. So that was the third thing that I learned in 2023, man. But what about you, man? Close us off. What's the third thing you learned?
First of all, I was going to say that's really good God math, it's like God math, and you can overestimate what you can do in a year, but underestimate like in 10 years, so there's a lesson in there as well. That's really good. For my third one, man, and if you know me or, if you can tell kind of how I am and how I'm wired, I always want things to go up and to the right, I want excellence to go up and to the right, and money to go up in the right, and all these things. So I want those things, everything to go well. And kind of what I learned this year is that like, man, like not everything is up and to the right. Like you can have a year that's like, okay, this year was not a year where we took a bunch of steps forward. It was a year of kind of like faithfulness, or it's a year of kind of persevering through suffering. And so I think sometimes when we look back on our year, we can think about kind of like the one good thing that maybe dominated the year, or maybe like a negative thing that dominated the year. But Rick Warren, who's a pastor, well-known pastor, has like a really good quote where he talks about, we tend to think of our life in terms of like peaks and valleys. And so we think, oh, this season of my life is a peak, or it's a mountain, or we think of this season of my life as a valley. And he said it's better to think of your life as kind of like railroad tracks, where like there's always good and bad happening in your life, right? There's always places in which you're taking steps forward. There's always places in which like there's suffering, or maybe you're regressing or taking steps back. And so as I look at this year, I was kind of tempted, honestly, to think, man, this is a really hard year. It's like a hard year for my marriage. We kind of went through, some struggles there. We got like the worst phone call of our life with a kind of a personal family tragedy. And so if you look back, I could look at 2023 and just think, man, just what a valley kind of year. But then just sitting with the Lord and honestly in prayer and with his word, I did more reflection and just kind of thought, literally I went through my pictures on my iPhone because I couldn't remember what happened in January. And I just went like kind of month by month, and I was like, man, like a lot of bad has happened this year, but also a lot of good. And so it's just a good reminder that like don't simplify your life into just like one particular issue or one particular like good thing. That like there's always good and bad, and the Lord is faithful in the midst of all of it, and so you can be faithful as well.
That's so good. That reminds me of the quote, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Yep.
And that's so good, man, because I've thought that a lot, in our situation as well. And it also reminds me for people the importance of like kind of protecting the narrative that you're telling yourself. We live in a world where like people attach like narratives on like, this political guy is good, he's the savior, this guy is very bad, and that's just how it is. And so everything he says is seen through a bad lens. Everything he says, no matter how crazy, is seen through a good lens, or maybe just your narrative of like, my job stinks, or my life is X, and probably a lot of the narratives end up being negative, but there's always good happening. There's always a reason to praise the Lord. Everything that we have is from him. And so Well, man, dude, this was awesome, dude. And hopefully we can do this again at the end of 2024 and have some more lessons. And I'm a little scared at the lessons I'm going to learn in 2024. Like, but we've learned that God is faithful. So once again, guys, thank you so much for checking out this podcast. Please do remember to subscribe to our channel here on YouTube and also all of our social media where you can find us. But we'll talk to you again soon.